Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel where today we are going to do a full-length, non-spoilery review of The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. So this book is an adult fantasy romance-esque kind of book, and we are following our main character of Linus. Linus is a caseworker for the department in charge of magical youth, and his whole job is to go investigate orphanages and determine if the kids are safe and being cared for appropriately. One day he gets this very mysterious assignment to go to this island that houses an orphanage. And at this orphanage are some of the most dangerous children in the system. And his whole thing is that he has to evaluate if and determine if these kids are maybe too dangerous. And the story goes from there. So let's go ahead and just jump right into the world building. And the world building is very, very interesting in that, for the most part, there's not a whole lot of it. So there is no magical system to speak of. It's just people can do magic. And we're not told anything about how they can do it. They just do. There's like no history. There's no there's nothing there. We don't know, for example, if like these magical beings have always been there or if they are a recent addition. Like, we get nothing about this situation, just that there is magical beings and that there are people who can do magic, and if you are one of those two people and an orphan, you're going to end up in one of these homes. And that's what we know. We really do only see what's important to the story. So even like we do find out some of the magical beings that are out there, like one of the kids, Talia, is a gnome, and we do find out a little bit about gnomes, but not much more than what we need to further the story along. What we do actually see a lot of is the department in charge of magical youth, and we can tell that it's a very bureaucratic system, very hierarchical. They have a lot of rules and regulations that are expected to be followed. Linus does his best to follow them, all of that kind of stuff. That's actually the most world building that we get. And honestly, because of all that, like I I find it very reminiscent of fairy tales, actually. Because in a fairy tale, like, you're just told the story. It's like, then he went to a witch's house and she turned him into a toad. And we're not told how or why. It just is. Like, you just go with it because that's part of the story. And, like, thinking about it like that, like, I definitely had questions about this world, but it didn't impact the story in any way because that's not what this story is about, right? It's not really about the world building, it's about everything else. And so, even though like I definitely could have used more for my personal preference, I don't think it was um, badly done, and I do think that we had enough for the story at hand. Next, let's talk about the characters. So Linus is this really interesting character that I think that the author did an amazing job writing, because Linus, it's this really weird balance, right? Because Linus has to be this naive non-parent who really only interacts with children in this very highly regulated kind of way. And you have to believe that he really cares about these children. And you also have to believe that he truly thinks that these regulations that this department in charge of magical youth have put into place is the correct way to parent and to bring up children. And you have to do it in a way that you can still love and appreciate him as a character. And that is incredibly hard to do, especially like as a parent. I was like reading this and going like, you got to meet the kids where they are, right? You can't, I have two different kids and I have to approach completely differently. So like having regulations in place that are like highly like very, very strict doesn't work. And so, but I still believed that Linus, first of all, absolutely believable as a character, and I still really liked him. And I believed that he truly cared for these children. And so I just think that the balancing act was done very, very well. And like the thing is, this is Linus's story. This is him honestly blossoming into this person he always had the potential to be, and finding a place where he is loved and appreciated for exactly who he is, And it was absolutely wonderful to watch. And just, oh, he was, and it really wouldn't have worked if you don't like Linus as a character. And so I just think that it was Linus, everything with Linus was absolutely lovely and well done. So then let's move on to the kids at this orphanage, and I think that they were fairly unique, fairly believable as kids. I absolutely loved my grumpy little gnome, Talia. She was absolutely my favorite. I did struggle occasionally with two of the kids. Like, they weren't quite unique enough because we didn't spend enough time with them in the beginning, and so kept mixing them up. But by the end, I definitely figured them out and I was good. It's just like that was I did find that to be a little bit of a struggle in the beginning. So, and then the other person that we should talk about is the adult that is in charge of this orphanage, and that is Arthur. Arthur also happens to be our love interest for the romance. Now, I just honestly wanted more from Arthur. Like, I think he's a well written character. We just don't get a ton, like, we see his background and some of his history, and we absolutely get to see him with the kids and how well he does with the kids. But that's like it. We don't, he's not a well-rounded individual. We just uh, and like I really wish we could have seen him away from the kids and who he is as an individual more than what we got. Especially because he was the love interest and I really wanted to root for them as a couple. Now, part of why I also struggled with Arthur is that literally, like, he talks in lessons in the first half of this book. Like, that every bit of his dialogue is just lessons for the kids. Like, I swear to you, at one point, he was just like, what did he say? He said, I'm going to paraphrase this quote, but it was like something like, sometimes what we fear the most is the stuff that we should actually fear the least. And it's irrational, and that's what makes us human. But when we conquer that, it shows us that there's nothing we can't do. That's the kind of the idea. And like that's how he talks all the time in the first half. And I was just like, I can't with this. Like I like kids need those lessons, but like not 100% of the time. And so it was very, very strange. Now he did kind of like settle down after that first half, but it did make it a little bit hard for me to get next to Arthur. And like I really wanted to love him because I knew he was going to be our love interest. So that part of it didn't quite work for me. Now, I did say in the beginning that this is romance, and then I added esque because even though it has this romance storyline is actually fairly background. It does hit a lot of the beats you would expect from a romance, but it's very background. And again, we don't get a ton on Arthur or their courtship or why they truly love each other. So it's like it has this romance, but it's not the main storyline. So just, set expectations appropriately for that. So next, let's talk about the plot. So the plot is very straightforward. It is kind of a middle grade kind of plot line in that it's Linus going and embracing like who he is as a person and blossoming and finding the people that he really wants to be around who love him and appreciate him for exactly who he is. And that's the story. That, you guys, that's really what it is. There really wasn't almost anything that was surprising. The only thing that I found surprising a little bit was the ending and how that went down. Like, we knew kind of big picture was going to happen, but the details were a little bit surprising to me, and I did really appreciate it. And honestly, like, I know that even though like saying it's predictable sounds like maybe I'm trashing it, I'm not. Like, you occasionally you just want that story where you know what it's going to be. You want to go along on the journey with it. And I think that this is an absolutely excellent version of that. So let's talk about the pacing and writing style. This is a medium paced book. It is written very similarly to a lot of middle grade books, but it has this very whimsical kind of feel to it. Again, very fairy tale like in its execution that I actually just really, really appreciated. And I did I mean, like, I liked the writing style of it, even though I'm not generally a whimsical, I don't always appreciate the whimsy. Um, so even though I will say, even though I call this a fantasy romance, fantastical romance esque, it's not really a fantasy and it's not really a romance, but I do think that if you are a fan of those genres, this is a book that will probably appeal to you. And I think that if you're a fan of those genres, you'll probably be a fan of this book. So just like set expectations correctly is the whole thing, that the romance isn't the main storyline. And with the fantasy, there are fantastical elements, but they're very like much not explained. So, I, but a lot of people ended up really, really loving this book in 2020. And I actually completely understand why. Because not only is it just this very cute, very fluffy kind of, just really sweet kind of book, it offered us so much hope that have like putting in the work into yourself and transforming into a better version of yourself can not only have an impact on how much you enjoy your life, but can have such a positive impact on the people around you, on the systems that you are a part of. And I think that that was a message that a lot of us kind of really needed to be reminded of in 2020. And I think that's why so many people ended up just adoring this book so hard. Um, Now, I didn't quite get those feels from it, so I ended up giving this a 4.25, but still obviously very much enjoyed this book and would highly recommend it to anybody who thinks it sounds interesting. But that is it, you guys. Leave me comments down below if you have read this and what you thought about it. But that's all I have. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And until next time, have happy reading, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.